Hello and welcome to our 8th episode of the unofficial SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is September 4th and Goran is back from vacation.
Hey.
So together with Robert and Goran, we'll continue to talk about anything related to SAP on Azure. As always, we'll start with some news from the last week, and then actually Goran will talk a little about shared disks. So welcome and let's get started.
Thanks. Welcome.
Welcome.
Goran, it's good to have you back. So
I would agree.
So let's take a look at what happened in the weeks that you were gone, or well, actually only in last week. And I think the first thing that I want to start is Ignite. So we have talked about Ignite, and just I think yesterday or the day before, the registration for Ignite opened. So if you have not done yet, head over to myignite.microsoft.com and register. It's free. It's a global event. I expect again there's some cool speakers already. The agenda I think is not yet completely available, but I'm sure here you can see a high-level agenda. But I think it will be definitely worth it. So just register.
And for all other for guys who doesn't know what Microsoft Ignite is, this is a Microsoft conference for IT professionals. Yeah, so it's not much about development tools. For that we have a Microsoft build in May. Yeah, but this is for IT professionals. Of course, today is very difficult to say where development and DevOps start, where IT or these classical infrastructure as a service topics are starting, but it's dedicated actually for IT professionals. Yeah.
I actually had the chance, I think 2 years ago or something like that. I was actually attending Ignite. And I very much liked it, actually. I mean, I've never attended Build, for example, which obviously is much more developer focused. But I was at Ignite and I thought it was a really nice event. So I hope that this will also be a cool online event.
3 days. Yeah, great.
My time it was called Microsoft TechEd.
That was TechEd, yeah.
Yeah, that was way before my time, Goran. So
when I visited, I mean the conference.
Okay.
2010. So
cool. Yeah. Good. The next thing that I quickly want to talk about is a virtual event again that happens across the globe. So it's called Business Uninterrupted SAP Solutions on Microsoft Azure virtual event. It's a 2-hour series of sessions. Where we have lots of interesting speakers. So we have speakers from SAP, and we have speakers from Microsoft that talk about different aspects of the whole SAP and Microsoft relationship, the different integration stories that we have. Obviously, we talk about the SAP Cloud Platform. We talk about S/4HANA. We talk about customer use cases and stuff like that. So this is, again, it's a virtual event. It's free. You can register. It's just 2 hours. There's multiple sessions. So, for example, the event for Europe, I would say, so UK, Western Europe is on September 29th. In the morning. So I think that's a nice format. It's again across the globe. So I also picked out the Japanese.
Now I understand what you are talking about. Okay.
Yeah, there you go, Robert. Multi-language. So it's I actually need to use Google Translate. Bing Translate. Sorry, Bing Translate.
You will do in Japanese or Chinese, and before this you will do a harakiri to make it easier.
So here it's called "Don't Stop Your Business."
Yes.
Yeah.
And I believe, Holger, you're one of the speakers, if I can remember.
I'm also one of the speakers. Yeah, but there are really some other great speakers as well. Hans Reuter, I really love his sessions when he talks about. I mean, he's from it's not called Microsoft IT anymore. It's called something else. I forgot the name, but he was very much involved in the SAP on Azure migrations that happened at Microsoft. He's obviously also very much involved in the S/4HANA migration, so he always has some really fantastic insights in what's happening there. Similarly, we have Jörg Bruch from SAP IT, who's mainly responsible for all the SAP on Azure migrations. So, SAP is a big customer of Microsoft Azure, obviously, also, and they have migrated a lot of their SAP systems already to Azure. So Jörg always also provides or shares some really fantastic insights in what's happening there, what went well, what didn't went well. So I think it's always really, really great to listen to them as well. And there are a lot of other great speakers. So yeah, if you are somewhere across the globe and you want to join, I can only recommend to sign up to these sessions.
Great.
Then I want to highlight something. So, we are, like mentioned, we are recording these podcasts always 1 day ahead, basically. So on Friday, and in actually 4 minutes. So unfortunately, I cannot join, but in 4 minutes, Christian Lechner is starting a new format, an SAP and Microsoft podcast or video podcast as well. He's live streaming. So yeah. I guess when you listen to our video podcast, it's too late to watch Christian's live, but you should head over to his channel and take a look. I think he has some really, really fantastic content as well. He's very much developer focused, so he's going into a little more details on how to work with Azure Functions or how to develop with the cloud application programming model. So I think it's definitely worth it to check out his video podcast as well. Good, and with this, we come to our special guest, and special guest not only because he's back from vacation and again participating in the podcast, but also the master of the Azure Shared Disk.
So cool.
Yeah. So, Goran, instead of me going over the blog and introducing you, maybe you can take over and talk a little about Azure Shared Disks.
Sure. So I share my screen. So master of disaster, right? That's the official title.
Fresh from vacation. This is additional portal.
Yeah. So this is one birth which took us a longer time. I just basically published the blog after a lot of checks about the Azure Shared Disk support and for the SAP Central Services on Windows cluster. So it's kind of quite new. I mean, generally, the story here, it's typically on Windows cluster, you have two approaches here. What you can do. You can do a shared disk like here, and shared disk could be anything what Windows cluster is supporting. And another way would be with a file share. So meaning central services would be install local disk, but those unique global host files, they would be put on any kind of file share. So both approaches are valid, so to say. Generally speaking here, file share with Windows cluster is relative a newer concept. I mean, few years new. Shared disk is an old concept, and meaning even from a longer time, it's available on Windows failover cluster for SAP. So this means many SAP basis admins and techie guys would be already basically familiar. Mm-hmm. And people would use their shared disk, let's say in the physical world, I mean, with different technology using like fiber channel, whatever, they would use in virtual world with a Hyper-V, you would have those VHDX disk, which is a shared disk, which you can attach to multiple VMs, which are cluster VMs. On a VMware, it's also can be done. So something similar is done in Azure. Basically, the shared disk is just a disk which is kind of enabled as and which can be attached to a multiple VMs, right?
So that means from Windows operating perspective, it's absolutely there's no difference. Is this shared disk in Azure or shared disk on
Exactly.
Okay.
So maybe let me share. I think I have a one opened. Windows cluster. So if you look here, it's an SAP Central Services, and here I have a disk, with the drive letter F, So when you do something like this, it's just a disk with the drive letter, and there is the an instance, Central Services plus global host, whereas this is located, right? So it's bundled in one. And if you, exactly what Robert said, if you open this on an on-premise world, virtual or physical, it would look exactly the same. So meaning that the onboarding would be much easier for many people because they are kind of familiar, right, with the concept. So Azure Disk is also, this is a let's say, alternative option to SIOS. So SIOS is also there. So let me also just tell you, what's new. That goes also in the part what's new. It's the documentation is also been reorganized. So also thanks to Ralica. So we both work, and she actually did the final wrapping. Ralica Delcheva from Jürgen Stoman's team. So the currently official documentation is basically, when we talk about the one SID, it talks also about, in the same time, about the SIOS as a shared disk and option, and then also as an Azure Shared Disk as a new one, right?
Okay. So we're just providing choice now to the customers.
Now we provide choice. Of course, SIOS is supported as well. Why not? So we just provide exactly the choice, right? The one interesting part is also here. Maybe if we go again to the blog, this is just a disk, right? And you can create this disk either through the PowerShell or maybe even through the let's say through the portal. So let me go, for example, to the portal. Maybe many people would be more familiar with, or it would be easier if I would say create a managed disk, like any kind of managed disk. I would put some disk SAP Shared Disk, a name. I will use, I don't know, let's say West Europe. I have a certain size. If I would go to next, an advanced topic here, I have option enable shared disk. And now here's interesting. We have some kind of parameter which has a kind of challenging name. Let me say max shares. This means that the disk can be, this is the number of the VMs between the one disk can be shared, the maximum number of the VMs, right? It has some interesting name, max share, but actually it means how many VMs can be attached, right? So maybe not just not to be.
Yeah, I think we are defining the pricing based on that. Correct.
So exactly, if you would go, for example, let me go into the some details about, actually we will also mention it's just a premium disk for now. We have a different premium disks which are currently supported, and depending on the size, those max share limit will grow. So P15 and P20 you can attach a maximum 2 VMs. But if you want more, you need to go to P30 to P50 with 5 and so on and so forth. So for example, if I would just go back, you see here I have 5 VMs where I can attach, and size is 1 terabyte. If I would change to P15, which is the minimum one, and go to advanced, and I enable share disk, I have only 2 max shares.
But Goran, why would I actually need to select this up front, or can I change this later on? Let's say I go back to this 1 terabyte and I could select 5. Why wouldn't I select the maximum there? Why would I start with 2?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, it's about
costs.
Exactly. So the point is, one aspect is currently one limitation is you can't do the striping. So just one disk which you need. So meaning you are driven there by two aspects. One is the size of the disk or space, right? And another aspect is the performance. So because it's one disk, if I need more IOPS and throughput, I need to have a bigger disk. Okay.
No, understood. But here with this max shares, let's say I start with 3 max shares, and then I at a later point in time I want to actually attach it to a 4th disk, to a 4th virtual machine.
You can do this. I mean, first you need to check that the disk size supports. For example, if you have a 1 terabyte P30, again, if it's labeled to 2, I mean, you can go immediately to 5. Let's say from the beginning. Why not? Question is what makes sense, right? Also from the number of VMs. But you can increase this number if you, for whatever reason, you have a label with 2 and you need 3. What you can do is you can change this max shares. You only need to deattach the disk, change this label to the disk and then attach, and then it would work.
So to answer your questions also, because we have support for premium disk and ultra disk, I'm just reading documentation. So if you select the ultra disk, then actually you don't need to select any or this max shares limit, because you always have from 1 till 5.
Right.
So you can change it, but only with ultra disk, because ultra disk is much more flexible as a premium disk what we have today.
Let's also check. Let's come to do a little bit later.
Okay.
So the only point is about basically it's about the limitations, right? Which are also constantly change. Let's jump to the limitations. So here in the blog, basically we have an please refer to official documentation for a list of limitation, right? So there are 2 parts. There's a limitation that the SAP owner, like Jürgen Thomas, would put, and there's also a limitation that might the Azure program management, independently of the SAP, would put or not, right? So one important aspect here of this solution is currently it's only availability set at the moment.
Okay.
Meaning one region you put an availability set, not in the zones. So we know, okay, people ask also for the zones. So we know this. I mean, I can only say that we do work to get also solution for this, but currently it's only availability set. Now, ultra disk, we do support the premium disks. You can also install or configure this with ultra disk, but the ultra disk at the moment does not support the VMs which are part of the availability set, which we from SAP side are requiring. I mean, you were talking about last time why availability set, you have those full domains and update domain. So we believe, okay, this is important part for the SAP overall availability and management of planned and unplanned downtime. It has to be, if we do with the region, meaning availability set, we have to use availability set. So ultra disk at the moment does not support availability set. That's why we said, okay, at the moment, we don't support ultra disk in the availability set context, but you can create the Windows cluster with ultra disk and you can install SAP only without the availability set.
Okay.
So that would work, but it will not be supported.
Okay. But I mean, if I'm reading this correctly, so availability zone, of course, we are not supporting, because my assumption is that we are not supporting cross-zones shared disks. Yeah.
Correct.
And this is coming, yes. I think. Yeah. Okay.
Correct. So let me not say anything here.
Yeah. Okay. But it's coming. Yeah.
Well, let me not say anything
in next episodes.
Let me say nothing.
But I also see proximity placement groups there. Yeah. So the topic that we talked about last week.
So exactly. So this is another point: is the cluster VMs need to be in Azure proximity placement group. So again, from a Azure Shared Disk perspective, this is not a must. So you can even do without. But if you do, I mean, without a proximity placement group, will here guarantee that the shared disk is close to the VMs or in the same DC. So I mean, if it's not part of the proximity placement group, okay, VMs would be closed because they are in availability set, so they will be actually part of the same Hyper-V cluster. But the shared disk could be in some other DC, and that could increase the latency. And in order to prevent this, we say, okay, put everything in a PPG, and that would also ensure that the shared disk is physically in the same DC like those VM, meaning that the latency is also good.
But Goran, availability set is also guaranteed that storage is in the same cluster or same data center like virtual machines. So why is now different from shared?
Correct. Disks? That's the guarantee in the case of the local disks.
Okay. Clear.
No, not the shared disk.
Okay.
Right? So again, it makes sense. I mean, we also say use the PPG generally, I mean, for the whole SAP system, just to bring it closer to reduce the latency between the VMs. But here it's more about physical proximity of the shared disk to the VMs, meaning being the same DC, because I mean, latency is important. Of course, it would be a global host file, so the closer, the better performance would be. Right? Okay. So we do request this, right? So these are some meaning it's a currently premium SSD, and it's also currently availability set. That's the current context. But again, it's also things are constantly changing, being improved. So having that set, for example, if you would go to also the Azure Shared Disk, independent of the SAP guides, and for example, look for region and availability. Till recently, actually, to the 2 weeks ago, it was just one region. Sorry, one region. Now it's like poof, exploded. Okay. So again, always check for the latest updates, and I mean, things are being expanded, limitations are being removed. Improved, so definitely there would be a relaxation.
Yeah, I assume if I ask you what about Linux, you will say no comment, probably. Yeah.
No, currently I can only say, or I can quote Jürgen Thomas. It's currently, I think, strategy. It's more to go for the file share. Here. Approach, not the shared disk. Let's see. I don't know if there would be some change. Linux is interesting. They do more kind of file share. They can also do, I believe, shared disk as well. But it's currently just more. Yeah. Okay. So this would be.
And how that now all together simplify my landscape?
So let's say I would say, I mean, if we talk about simplicity, meaning you need just a shared disk. So, for example, I put here in the blog, okay, and also the cost. Cost is how much of stuff I have, right? Yeah. So, in the one example was file share approach with scale out file server and storage spaces direct. So, meaning if you would, the customer who are using this, they would have, in addition to an ASCS cluster with, let's say, for example, 2 VMs, they would have 2 or ideally 3 VM of scale-out file servers. And each scale-out file server would need to have at least 2 local data disk, which would be used for storage spaces direct. So meaning you would have a 3 VMs plus minimum 6 disks. And all this you need to manage, So scale-out file server and storage space direct is basically just replaced with one disk, which are not extremely expensive, I would say. I mean, premium disk. And from a management perspective, just a disk, it's just one disk, so to say. So overall, you need just, 2 VMs. Let's say, meaning also from the, we're talking about 24/7, they run all the time. So just the 2 VMs, it's less cost now. Maybe when you mention also those how many VMs, and we also how many you can attach. You said it's 2 to 5 to 10. What does it make sense, right? So also we here in the blogs you said we support, this is one SID with Enqueue Replication version 1. It's also, the documentation is also enhanced. SAP on Azure talk about ERS2 as well. So this is one SID with ERS2. Again, ERS2 is nothing special. It works with shared disk, it works with file share. The only specific is you have a 2 cluster group, right? So Now, when we talk about how many nodes, of course, minimum is 2. This is also cost effective. If you would say I would put 3, in the ERS1 context, it makes maybe less sense in a sense that you can add a third node or fourth, and there you can also configure ERS and ASCS, but with ERS1, ASCS and ERS would be configured actively only between the 2 nodes, for example, first and the second. So if of course you can change this and say, okay, now please run between 2 and 3, but it's a manual action. So maybe it's not so convenient. I mean, more nodes on a compute side means more resiliency from a compute perspective, of course. So more is also could be better, but increase the cost. But ERS here, ERS2, it's much better because ERS2 is also clustered. And ERS2 is can be it automatically works across 2 or more nodes. So, for example, ERS and AS is generally configured that they are with this anti-affinity. So, meaning ASCS will be on 1 node and ERS on the second node. But if you have a third node, for example, and second node with ERS fails, ERS would fail to the third node, not to the first one, right? But that would happen automatically. So, meaning you don't have any administrative tasks here to do. And ERS2 generally with a higher version, S4HANA. So again, you're motivated to go to S4HANA as well and to use it as well. So that would make sense from a technical perspective. I mean, it's improvement, let's say, from a number of nodes. Also, what is supported is multi-SID, meaning, again, very, very interesting topic for cost reduction and consolidation. So here's the example of with ERS1, both 2 SIDs with ERS1, and another example is with 2 SID and ERS2.
And so do have 2 shared disks do you have 1 shared disk per SID? Yeah.
Exactly, 1 shared. So it's also in the colors. It's ERS2 is actually using also put on a local disk, but the profile is on a shared disk. So. But it's 2 disks per SID, exactly, yeah. This is a bit new decision or news on the Windows side, although technically you can configure a multi-SID, and one SID could be an ERS1 and another SID could be an ERS2. The decision is also to have, to reduce the complexity, to support only multi-SID with either ERS1 or only ERS2, like this. Right. So this is also being more maybe compliant to Linux. Linux, there is this also limitation from earlier, right? So it's kind of, although technically it works to mix it, but it's just a limitation to be aware, right? Maybe also one interesting part, it's also that you can do use this also for the heterogeneous landscape where database would be on Linux and use whatever, so HANA. I don't know, for example, with Pacemaker. So that's an old blog. What I have here, a link, an old blog is basically talking about, and from that time, scale out file server solution for the central services and application service on Windows, but HANA is on database. So basically here, what those 4 VMs, or ideally would be 5, scale out file server with 3 nodes, would be replaced with just the 2 nodes. So meaning it's less stuff to manage, less cost. It's just the one disk. So I mean, one part is simplicity. It's really simple.
But Goran, since you mentioned this setup, because I think in the past, or sometimes when I go to customers and I talk about this kind of setup, there's a lot of questions. Well, why would I run it on different operating systems? And I think, you explained this to me some time back in more detail of the benefits actually of running this on Windows, and obviously HANA cannot run on Windows. That's clear.
No. Yeah. I mean, there is a different reason why you could do it. I mean, generally, I like the simplicity, and I mean, simplicity also means you keep everything on the same operating system and same level, you know. But again, so these kind of mixing of the operating system maybe increase a bit complexity, but if you have a good reason, then you can do it. And good reason is that Windows cluster for the central services very advanced and stable solutions. Let's say supported by SAP. It has from the installation documentation, SAP itself, it's supporting is many people are also knowing Windows, so they want to continue. But if they go to S/4HANA, of course, HANA is on Linux. So, okay, they would SAP, Microsoft IT is, for example, doing like this. SAP IT also as well for those most critical systems. Many customers are doing. Another reason could be, for example, you run Oracle on Linux, for example, and Oracle on Linux, then you could also use, for example, Windows for the central services, for example. So that's always, I mean, generally we have a very good experience with the Windows cluster here, and people are using a lot of it. It's a very, very, I would say, very mature solution, you know. So
so when you go back to your new blog, the latest one. So when we were talking about these shared disks, I know we are always creating 3 copy for all storages and all stuff, but is this enough from a resilience perspective, or you can say this is somehow maybe potentially a single point of failure?
So that's you're referring to this important part here.
Okay.
The thing is, yes, as you mentioned, we do replicate 3 times. We guarantee that these are not lost. But the point is, it's one disk and it's placed into one storage cluster. I mean, we have also cluster for storage, not just one something. It's also designed for, but it's just one storage cluster. So meaning, potentially because it's one disk, if that whole storage cluster goes down, I mean, this could go down. ASCS would go down, right? So that's maybe a bit kind of.
But I think this is going together in mapping, availability sets and SLAs what you have and how availability level you have on that, and on when you go in direction availability zone, what you have availability zone, and when we have this option also for availability zone, then in general that important line probably will disappear. Let's say like
that will disappear, exactly. So with the zones, if hopefully we get there something that would disappear, but also even in the availability set, we look for the concept to improve this. So to maybe stretch between the different storage cluster. I mean, the likelihood here that the whole storage cluster go down is extremely small, but in theory, I mean, if the planet Earth goes down, we are down.
We still have Mars.
It's a single point of failure, right? So, but this is also important to mention, right? Definitely. What else? Yes, and again, also maybe not to, I was just mentioning, there is no striping at the moment, meaning one disk. If you need more space, it's very easy to do it. Shut down the VM, increase the disk size, start the VM, and just extend on the Windows, extend the storage. That's it. So it's very, 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 very easy, basically. Or if you need more performance. One also interesting part. I mean, the documentation is basically also thanks to Relica. It's also rewritten or reorganized a bit on the Windows. Again, the documentation, it's a more kind of semi-manual procedure with some scripting, but it's still semi-manual procedure. One part is also that there is an Azure ARM template, which is, I just need to give credit to Keith Mayer from Microsoft, who developed this. Basically, you can try it. It works for the ERS1. We will add it for ERS2 as well. It's basically what it will do. It will create. Let me maybe if you click to deployment, you can choose the region. You can put some prefix, for example, for TS3. You need to have pre-configure network. And subnets. You need to have pre-configure Active Directory AD/DNS. Then you just put some light on Contoso and some very, very hard to crack username, like domain admin. You choose the, I need something more, doesn't matter. It should be better. You can choose the VM size. You can choose between it's a supported 2019, 2016.
Okay.
Right? That should
Windows.
be enough.
Mhm.
Windows, yes. Accelerator networking is there. You would need just to put the subnet, for example, which is there in the explain how you can do is you just call this PowerShell command, and then it will print out, and you just add this information. You need to put a fixed IP of the ELB, which was used for the ASCS instance.
Okay.
The Pro port, you need to choose the disk size, and actually to create 2 VMs. Yeah, it's 2 VM cluster, right? Maybe that could be improved as well. You can also choose the disk label. And also it will configure automatically the Azure Azure Witness as
okay.
So meaning what you would, when you click on create, what you will get, let me just go something like this. So it's a 2 VMs, Windows VMs. It's a created availability set. They are added. It's created also the PPG as well. It's also created the shared disk here. Of course, NICs and so on and so forth. The VMs are added to the Active Directory, to the domain, which is very nice. The disk is formatted and added to the cluster. The cluster is created, configured with the Azure Cloud Witness. The shared disk is formatted, added to the cluster, meaning it's really prepared. It's prepared for the SAP installation. So basically this VM here, what I did is actually, or 2 VMs, what I did with this ARM template.
Cool.
Right. Cool. Yeah. So that would basically just really speed up the stuff we will improve it also, I believe, with years too. It will not be a problem. Load balancer is created, configured, backend pools, Pro ports, everything. It will also do the standard load balancer, not the basic one, just because we always recommend just do the standard load balancer, better performance. We are more ready for the zones in the future, for example, migration. That would be so. Right, yeah. So that's also, I have to give credit to him. Also big, I hope maybe we can get Keith as well next time, maybe also the hopefully Azure PM from Shared Disks, Bava Ramados, and maybe Ralitza from SAP PM HADR team as well, if we need to go deeper. But that's also there. I just want to mention their contribution there as well, apart to mine.
But I think you were involved in a lot of testing.
I was doing the whole engineering testing. I write the core of the documentation, so to say. Ralitza was then Delcheva. She was then doing a wrap up and
so
published.
That means if you have issues, please contact Goran Condric.
And of course, I mean, I always publish my account number there, so.
Disclaimer.
Yeah. Just a lot of stars.
One ugly question. I know the answer, but I just want to ask for our audience, so to say. So I assume that we don't have yet support for the Azure Site Recovery and Shared Disks.
Yeah, there is not yet, exactly. So the point is, we know people ask for the zones, people also ask for the DR.
Yeah, exactly.
So then you have a combination, okay, I want to I have an availability set, and I want to do a DR in another region and also have an HA, or I have Azure zones and I want to do a DR in another region, also put in a zone. So we don't have yet at the moment, but it's being worked. I mean, solution is being worked. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. I know that's also DRs. It's basically automatically comes as a question, and I mean it's not forgotten. Definitely, it's just quite intensively being worked. Yeah, to enable something there.
Okay, super, great. Wow.
So I would say it's really simple. I mean, the huge value is really simplicity. The always trouble with this clustering, it's too complicated, and how complexity means can bring instability, not high availability, low availability is sometimes I'm joking,
I mean, not just that, when I'm talking from partner perspective, like managed service provider, if I manage service provider, I need to invest a lot of maintenance from clusters and now it's much more simple.
Right. So here's just the 2 nodes which you need to patch and maintenance, and here's just shared disk, which is just really the disk. The only difference between the other managed disk is just this max count parameter, where you specify a number of VM where you can attach or clustered VMs. That's it. But the rest, creation either in Portal or in PowerShell on Azure CLI is basically the same.
So how many multi-SIDs we are supporting on Windows today? Maximum 5 or not, or more?
There is no official statement there. On Linux is 5.
Yeah.
I'm just discussing also with SAP team. Shall we something limit here? Currently there is no limitation, but I mean the more number, you need to be very careful when sizing this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
you know,
of course,
people tend extreme stuff just to put unbelievable number of SIDs. And lower the VM size, you know, and the disk size, and you know, in this way, they do, for example, with scale-out file server like this, you know. So, as an example, so you always have to think, okay, I need to have enough bandwidth. Every VM has a limit to the storage.
Of course.
So you always have to calculate this, you know. That not, I mean, technically you can put more, you know. I think there is a limit. Azure load balancer with, not sure, maybe 10 or something like this, the IPs, or maybe a bit more, that would be a kind of maybe limit, definitely, at least from that side. But you need always to think how much is my each disk in this context, how much the bandwidth I have, you know, and if you have a multi-SID like here, you know, then you always have to think, okay, these two disks have total number of IOPS like this or throughput like that, and that must not cross the total VM IOPS and throughput limit.
Yeah, of course.
You know, for example, those kind of stuff. So need to be careful size, you know. So because tendencies people tend to save, they put a smaller number. Smaller VM sizes, which are cheaper, but then they complain about the performance.
Yeah, of course. So, okay, good point. Thank you.
So I think that would be kind of more or less, all about the shared disk. Again, feel free to try it on the customer side. There's a lot of interest actually, to simplify.
So conclusion is, dear Microsoft, if you want to have such a nice presentation, you just need to first send a Goran on vacation, and then he will present some.
Actually, I like the idea, you know.
No, I think that was perfect, Goran. Thank you very much. And I think we will share, obviously, the links and also the links to the GitHub repo, so you can quickly get started. I think that's really, really an easy way, to get started and to play around with it, to test it.
Right. So, maybe we get some other PMs to get more information, updated information, like Vibala Ramdos from Azure Shared Disk team, Ralica Delcheva, you know, from SAP H8 PM team, and so on, and other people, just because these things are also changing, improving. Again, always look to this limitation, which are, again, I'm also surprised is being slowly limited or expanded, improved.
Perfect.
Cool.
Good. I think with this, we're done for this week. Any other open topics?
No.
Otherwise,
we'll prepare something for next week. Don't worry.
No, I think we already have some nice topics for next week and the weeks ahead as well. So stay tuned, I would say.
Yep.
Good. Then thank you very much, everyone, and talk to you next week again.
Thank you. Till next time. Bye.
Bye.